Jiren was a seriously overpowered antagonist relative to his arc. In fact, it may have required Goku to grow more in a single arc in just 40 minutes to survive against Jiren than in any other arc in Dragon Ball history, and I may not even be exaggerating. Goku vs. Jiren was such a build-up match that the Mexican government would host their final battles as if they were real people fighting. Clubs would offer discounts based on the outcome, and many sites on the internet repeatedly crashed over and over again. While on Twitter or wherever else, they would talk down about how Jiren and how uninteresting and boring he was, the reactions from everyone else were much different. Jiren made everyone want to watch. It got to the point that even within his own show, if Jiren even twitched an eyebrow, it would cause us to be interested. Even Goku himself would become Jiren's fanboy, Vegeta as well, constantly obsessed with every single one of his slight movements and variations, as Jiren built him up into someone worth fighting. Going from Jiren calling him nameless fodder that didn't deserve a name, to considering him a genuine rival in power at the end. The levels Jiren was on were so titanic that even over 3 arcs later, Vegeta is still talking about how crazy he was at fighting. That's like people talking about how good King Piccolo was at throwing hands while they're fighting Frieza or Cell. That being said, there's a lot to unpack here, with one of the most hyped up fighters in the entire Dragon Ball multiverse, including the power we saw and his future powers too. As in the words of Whis, his potential is utterly immeasurable. As an interesting starting point or side point for Jiren, I guess one fun detail to remember, or maybe learn if you're an anime only, is that he's actually somewhat nerfed in the Tournament of Power off the bat. Technically speaking, he uses equipment during his Pride Trooper or superhero duties, most specifically his ability to transmute enemies. He shows this after flying through outer space like Superman to reach the Pride Troopers on a mission faster than any spaceship, and these spaceships being able to travel across the universe in days even with older models. The Pride Troopers, most specifically though, Dispo and Topo, get caught in a foam attack and cannot move. Despite seeing this coming, they can't react, which is especially crazy for Dispo. You could argue that they were caught off guard and that it didn't matter what their max speed was, but it's still pretty incredible to think about this in terms of random enemies, as no real fodder character could catch Dispo and Topo in an attack that they can't move in after they've already been caught, meaning Topo and Dispo didn't just power up and it went away. Jiren then slams this monster over the head, not instantly one-shotting it, probably flying much faster than the speed of light, possibly infinite speed, we'll go over later, but maybe not in this instance, and then uses a device to transmute it into a literal mighty beam and seal it away. This is a very important and overlooked quirk, especially for a Dragon Ball character, as this gives Jiren the ability and methods to deal with many immortal characters. Take, for instance, Fusion Zamasu. If you were to pummel him down and weaken him, he could then transmute him and seal him up, similar to how Moro was eventually prisoned in an honestly much weaker verse. Beerus also uses a transmutation technique where he turns the old Kai into the Z-Sword as well. This could potentially and likely work even against the likes of other shonen immortals like Kaguya, Aizen, and so on, especially if he has the ability to weaken them or damages them heavily first, as just an example. With Dragon Ball characters possessing such massive existence erasing powers by the level of Jiren, that this seal is notably powerful, but I'll go into some of those details a bit later. That being said, Jiren was oddly alien to Dragon Ball. On top of his literal appearance being an alien, by the time Dragon Ball Super reached the episode 109 or 110 special and crashed the internet, things started to change. The sound design, the way they fought, the expressions of the characters, the goofy nature and demeanors, even the ending, the tone of everything shifted. It was like what we always wanted Goku to do the entire run of the show, to just snap out of it and take things as seriously as possible. Show us how good at fighting you really should be at this point. Jiren, likewise, was zipping around the universe like a god of destruction, whereas Beerus and Champa could zip around solar systems playing ping pong with planets, or traversing the entire universe instantly, and Jiren was hyped up as being beyond even that level, beyond a god of destruction. In every single promotional material, every piece of material after the fact, every statement, every feat, this character was next level. When Beerus and Whis saw Jiren in action, Beerus was shit himself, just knowing he was only using fractions of his power, while we said he had surpassed all the rumors they had heard about him, if they were even talking about him, being the mortal that surpasses a god of destruction. Even before Jiren fought Goku, the way he moved was different. By just punching the air, he could annihilate beings like Majikayo that would ensnare and give a god-level Dispo problems. Think, for instance, of other shonen or battle manga characters like Saitama one-shotting Boros. Boros, a guy who could blow away a planet or a star with all his power. Then look at Jiren doing this to a god-level Dragon Ball character while using nothing that could even be called remotely serious. In fact, saying he was serious would be seriously wanking Dispo and Majikayo. A percentage of this strength would just be straight inaccurate, to the point he might have dealt with Majikayo, a multi-universal entity, using less than 1% of his max power, possibly not even 1/1000th of it, which I'll show you later. He outscales characters that can deal so much damage that teleporting damage to another dimension is made useless, like in the case of Butamo, Blue Vegeta, and Annie Raza punches through space, or Ultra Instinct Omen shaking infinity. None of it mattered. Jiren was above. Even Super Saiyan God, the character who would have punched the macrocosm away with Beerus into non-existence, the feat you've probably heard so many times you can recite what the YouTuber is going to say before he even does it. Jiren stops that with one finger. Once again, likely at not even thousandths of his overall power. Hit, the character who can skip through time, gets utterly steamrolled by him, to the point Jiren can precog every single one of Hit's attacks from the future, and even when Hit crushes his very heart with an assassination technique while off guard, Jiren then heals it on the spot with his own energy. Hit then whips out a move that can stop all of time around him, literally sealing him in stop time, and Jiren walks through it and then KOs him. Vados, a being or an angel who can manipulate time, then says Jiren's power surpasses time itself. For a while, I've thought about this statement, and there are many ways to look into that statement. Of course, you could do sort of a generic, well, the power overwent the hacks in Dragon Ball, but in Dragon Ball, it is often attributed that speed and power are somewhat correlated. This is a safe general rule unless specifically stated otherwise, as characters both empower their literal power and their speed with the same energy source. So if a character had 5 speed and 5 power and 10 ki, then it would be very safe to assume that if they have 100 ki, they could exert 50 speed and 50 power. Some exceptions to this are Birder, Namek Goku, and maybe Goku in general, Grade 3 Trunks, Dispo, and Ultra Instinct Goku. There are some others, but those are the main. Birder is faster for his power level because he specifically had to develop his speed to do chores on time in a gag pamphlet. I'm not joking, that's the only remote explanation we'll ever have of that, and I have to live with it. Namek Goku is likely faster for his power level of 90,000, say, compared to Captain Ginyu's 120,000, because he has been training in incredibly heightened gravity. So his body would likely zip around disproportionately to his strength level due to him being used to flying around much heavier than he really should be. Grade 3 Trunks just specifically gets too much mass to move his body properly, although this doesn't actually affect other behemoths like Broly and potentially Max Power Master Roshi as an example. Grade 2 Vegeta also has increased power and speed in the data books despite muscle mass increase. Dispo is specifically the speed guy, and Ultra Instinct Goku's power is somewhat close to his speed anyway. It was mainly disproportionate in Omen because his attack power and likely durability wasn't being increased until Omen 3 and Anime mastered Ultra Instinct. In the manga though, Silver Ultra Instinct, not mastered like the anime, has more speed than power, with Jiren being able to straight up tank his attacks at many instances with low damage. But generally, power and speed are somewhat correlated, and are usually probably in the same order of magnitude, give or take, in Dragon Ball. You'd have to really make a niche and honestly debatable example to try and find the contrary that doesn't follow this norm. Time is a very complicated thing as we then go into that, and it sort of depends on your definition of time. Surpassing time could mean that your power surpasses the time itself that decides whether you're allowed to move or not, or allows him to move in general, with his power then granting him the authority or the ability to move regardless of what time is stopping him from doing. However, surpassing time, especially in terms of a more generic definition like per se, in quote, the indefinite continued progress of existence and events in the past, present, and future regarded as a whole, may give statements like this a whole different meaning, as Vados just says he surpasses time itself, not just hits time stop. It's also implied Zeno can easily float around in a multiverse that no longer even has a timeline, so it may not be too far-fetched to say that Jiren just being able to move whether time is stopped or not even present is likely. The characters are also stated to shake the World of Void and alter it greatly. If the deeper portions of the World of Void still don't have time, or even a classical model of space that can be considered due to it potentially having no concept of space or time in strange guides, I'm not even joking, even a sticker book says this shit. And this is stated in Chozenshu about the subspace around the Room of Spirit and Time as well. Then altering or shaking it may further show this quality, even if their energies expanded and engulfed the entire area somehow, and that was what was shaking, it would still apply. If Jiren's power allows him to reach a level of speed where time isn't even in the equation, then you can argue a potential level of infinite speed or inaccessible speed for him. Infinite speed for Dragon Ball is as simple as these characters are always stated to have infinite power or levels of infinite power. Their universe is a standard infinite model, ever-expanding, boundless, infinite galaxies, and then it has a hermetically sealed-off afterlife that makes it a macrocosm on top of it and a god sphere outside of it, yet they can destroy these things, etc. But that would destroy infinity in finite time. But what happens when you do anything in zero time instead? You find that the speed formula starts to shut down a bit, and it's very easy to interpret Jiren at that level of speed by statements, feats, and lore itself. Even God of Destruction Hawkeye attacks are implied to have existence erasure on a level that may surpass causality, affecting you in other timelines unless there's specific reasons why, like a time ring or Super Shenron immortality, albeit this is debatable. And Jiren's instinct-like powers surpass Hawkeye and God of Destruction levels of combat and power in every piece of information we have on him before and after his appearance. Vegeta, just straight up in Ultra Ego, surpasses a Hawkeye attack with his raw ki level, and Jiren is way above that. If you backscale or think that Jiren surpasses, say, Dragon Ball Z movie characters, then you could argue they move through subspaces when they teleport beyond time and space, like Metal Cooler, yet can chase after you in them after you've already accessed them before and after you've left. This too would be infinite types of speed on a generic level, with Koyama, the director of the Dragon Ball Z anime and movies, thinking Battle of Gods Beerus surpasses Broly, who surpasses any other movie character in his opinion. Even in a generic movie scaling idea, every villain was supposed to surpass the last, and then Broly was the only exception, which you could likely link to Dragon Ball Super versions as well. Jiren would also, with that, likely massively outscale even movie statements like Super Gogeta surpassing the Big Bang from our reality, in theory, which literally created time-space of our likely four-dimensional universe in theory and concept. Not a four-dimensional, three-spatial, one-temporal model, but more like that Einstein four-dimensional spatial model, being used to describe a power level in a world that likely didn't even have a Big Bang like Dragon Balls, having been made by the Kais instead. If Koyama thinks Beerus surpasses this, then that is also in the bag for just Battle of Gods, which honestly surpasses even lowballing possibly millions of times. Battle of Gods Goku is about to shatter a macrocosm with skies so large even a planet as big as an infinite universe will disappear from sight if you keep going inside of it. You could describe this as sort of, think of an infinity that goes 1 through infinity, and then think of an infinity that goes 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 to infinity if you're confused about how there could be different levels of infinity. But this is mainly just a fictional concept anyway. Even in terms of raw statements, his speed is considered super dimensional, while suppressed against Omen 3 Goku, which can literally translate to something being above 3-dimensional. And even in Dragon Ball terms, it's to describe the next dimension of combatants, which is only stated by Gogeta versus Broly respectively, who are so powerful they accidentally just shatter through and battle in other dimensions. A higher dimensional being is usually considered some type of eldritch abomination or eldritch overlord that needs to use weird methods to interact with the universe normally. Think of like One Punch Man God and stuff like that. In terms of power scaling, there's a few ways to go about things like this, but for some series it's about the numbers, for others it's about the relationships between the characters that don't have numbers to those that kind of do. For instance, in my last Boruto video, some people got upset because I didn't literally outline the multiplier of Boruto compared to previous characters, but in a verse like that, it's more important to just know Boruto surpasses this is the greatest feat, maybe it's slightly unquantifiable, but Boruto applies to that and he can stomp this, as an example. But Jiren is a bit of both of these concepts. He's both got the numbers in terms of feats and the numbers in terms of his relationships with those that have feats. So when Vegeta says, that Jiren guy wasn't much different than us in power, just real good at throwing hands, when it comes to the anime, we then can say with 100% certainty, that's bullshit, or he means something completely different than we think. For reference, here's a timeline. God Goku destroyed Universe 7 Macrocosm with Beerus. We'll say that this is a 1. He absorbs this into his base form, surpasses Super Saiyan that rivaled God Goku via the narrator. Then later on, base Goku was able to press Beerus greater than any Super Saiyan 3 or any fighter before that, even in filler and later on. He then stacks Super Saiyan on top of his new God level base form, so we'll call that a 50. Super Saiyan 2, 100. This is downplaying Super Saiyan 2, ignoring El Manga Legendario saying that grade 3 Super Saiyan 1 is like a 10 times multiplier or 5 times multiplier. And then Super Saiyan 2 is the ultimate Super Saiyan state in terms of power. But ignoring that, Super Saiyan 3 is then 400, once again downplaying. Then he goes Super Saiyan Blue, which is over 50 times Super Saiyan God in the anime. You can deduce that 50 times multiplier due to the Kefla fight and common sense. The Broly movie makes it more obvious, and so does the manga, which is even higher. This would be 20,000. Then he can stack Kaioken times 10, 200,000 against hit on top of this. During the Goku Black arc, Goku has to surpass his limits to surpass an attack from Fusion Zamasu, whose power was just stated to stretch comparatively infinitely or to no end from what he was before. With Goku Black saying that he feels bottomless power that can even consume entire dimensions outside their time space, with his power to basically infinitely clone himself to jump his ops. After the Goku Black arc, Goku can then stalemate hit after training and using his kill moves inside another dimension, and can stalemate Master Golden Frieza with just Super Saiyan Blue, bare minimum over 10 times greater than Universe 6, meaning base Blue is now 200,000. Even worse is that in Dragon Ball Z Revival of Frieza, Frieza got infinitely more powerful from 6 months of training on the website. This true Golden Frieza could even line up with that infinite gap suggested by the Goku Black arcs or incomprehensible fusion increases. And the tournament of power right off the bat, Goku can go Kaioken times 20 Blue, which would be 4 million. The Universe 7 Spirit Bomb is massively more powerful than Kaioken 20 Blue Goku. Then Goku just combines all his power on top of it. So it's more than likely over 20 times, and let's just be straight up honest, probably 40 times Blue Goku, or 8 million, and Jiren then blinks it away. By the time Kefla appears, she slams fatigued Blue Kaioken Goku in the head with power rivaling the Spirit Bomb, 8 million. Blue Kaioken Goku here is debatable, as we don't know if he's in Kaioken times 2, Kaioken 20. Even if it's 20, you can get a good number from this, as Kefla then goes Super Saiyan 2 to then face off against Omen 2 Goku, or 16 million. Kefla then gets enraged kill shot powers to amp her further beyond Super Saiyan 2, and remember she has Kale, who gets these massive enraged amps that lets her one-shot Omen Goku, but that's not quantifiable. Vegeta Blue then launches a final flash at Jiren so powerful that Velmod, Vegeta, and potentially Goku thinks it's above what the Spirit Bomb was doing, or 8 million, and Jiren actually has to block it and gets knocked down by it. Vegeta thinks the power Jiren is exerting somewhat around this is actually greater than anything he's ever felt, likely greater than Kefla, who he did sense and feel, and likely Fusion Zamasu, who rivaled Goku Black Arc Vegeta Blue. So Vegeta and just base Blue might reach 16 million, if you're charitable. Goku and Vegeta then grow more powerful, and Goku and Vegeta rival each other in Kaioken times 20 and Blue Evolution. Both are 20 times multipliers, as confirmed by the Dragon Ball Super directors, saying Blue Evolution is his Kaioken times 20 equivalent, or 320 million at this list. Goku gets many times more powerful fighting Jiren, and then eventually reaches Omen 3, which is 640 million if we use the same formula lowballing, or possibly 1.28 billion using Omen as 2 times the Spirit Bomb, or around Super Saiyan 2 Kefla level when it was during that battle before she got enraged. Then Goku goes Mastered Ultra Instinct, and in the anime it is mastered, it's stated to be mastered, which is 100% greater than a Super Saiyan 2 Kefla equivalent if it were to appear back then, over 1.28 billion lowballing on this list. Jiren at hidden power then annihilates this Goku 1v1 about 2 times and actually gets frustrated. He has to keep beating MUI Goku's ass. Then Goku gets powered up from his friends, and the movie pamphlets, Toriyama, and everything in Dragon Ball imply courage and friendship amp your ki levels. You can go over how key components work and so on and so forth. But in the Z Broly movies, it does this by over 1,000 times in the guidebook as an example. Jiren then comes back and fights off enraged MUI Goku. This would be a level that Goku in the manga version didn't reach for 3 arcs until he fights basically Gas using this in Ultra Instinct Omen, not even the silver-haired version, and then Gohan Beast. Remember, potentially billions of times in terms of a power increase since Super Saiyan God and Battle of Gods, where they are nuking a multi-universal macrocosm that potentially surpasses dimensions that can fit multiple other universes in just the afterlife alone. It just tells you how much Beerus is holding back, by the way. I recommend this Beerus video after this. Even if you say that base Goku didn't surpass Super Saiyan God and divide this all by 20,000, MUI is still over 60,000 times stronger than Battle of Gods, and that's not including all of the potential fusion arguments you can make, such as even a Namek fusion may be 3 million times stronger, because in Daizenshu base Goku has a power level of 3 million, based on the Fighter X Fighter formula, let alone a Super Saiyan Blue fusion whose base form surpasses a Super Saiyan Blue fusee itself, with MUI being greater than that in the anime, as Beerus concedes to being his inferior in the guidebooks. It also means that if you think Vegeta Blue is Beerus level, which is in V-Jump in the manga version, the MUI in the anime would be greater than a Vegeta Blue counterpart, and this is already confirmed as through Vegeta's dialogue, through Beerus' statements. But in the manga itself, this may be less true, as Vegeta Blue is still technically above Goku in the manga. Also, it makes sense with the lore at the time in the anime, and this all adds up with the statements and things actually happening on screen, and would explain why Jiren got so strong that everyone in the audience was going to get wiped out by just his aura, like he had a Bleach Yamamoto Bankai power-up, and he was likely suppressing this radius as well, and power, just to not get disqualified, as if he killed people with his aura, he would just be DQ'd. This leads us into a pecking order argument, where we don't have to do numbers, but more of would Jiren still be considered strong, per se? And the answer is probably yes. If we go by the movies, Broly, and Superhero, Jiren is only officially surpassed when Gohan Beast clashes against Cell Max at full power, as that battle is the strongest fight we've ever seen in Dragon Ball history according to the promo material. Jiren versus Broly is a bit odd, as in the manga he doesn't do anything and he is still weaker than Beerus even with mastery over his powers and many amps that were almost Super Saiyan 2 and beyond equivalents for Kale during the Tournament of Power. By the way, Kefla also likely has an amp Super Saiyan 2 way beyond the norm, whereas Jiren in the manga is above God of Destruction level still, and Broly and Black Frieza are beneath God of Destruction level. The only thing I can imagine is if Jiren is above God of Destruction level, but for Broly and Frieza, they're specifically talking about Beerus level, who also could be considered above the average God of Destruction level due to the God Brawl. Jiren also likely just directly performs worse against MUI and Ultra Ego than, say, Gas does. Even though he could tank strikes and definitely put UI down in the manga, in the anime he is above God Destruction level and Beerus in his base state. And then he gets basically this God hidden power MUI-like amp and grows so strong he could foderize a high God Destruction level fighter or someone above it entirely, as the promo material does. The only for sure certain statements we have about this is Piccolo saying Jiren's power grew dramatically, with the only other reference to a dramatic type power-up that really comes to my mind is the triple fusion robot, Koichi Raider. He's called something different in English, it's a bit easier to say, but being stated to dramatically power up by Krillin when it turned into Annie Raza, going from getting pretty low diffed by Goku, Vegeta, and Gohan to almost overpowering Goku, Vegeta, Gohan 17, and Frieza put together. There are promotional arguments for Broly being the strongest enemy to date, but technically speaking, most things that say similar things for Jiren are likely referring to the similar word for rival and so forth. So the titles and qualities being applied to Jiren and Broly can still actually be different. And in Xenoverse, these two are just made rival powerhouses, which honestly, good decision. Pretty cool idea. But going off the anime, Jiren would likely be above Broly. However, I wouldn't say the opposite is also impossible. You could just interpret Broly as above Jiren, but it's just to go against Jiren, you have to ignore just heaps of lore and context that pretty much just contradict the Broly claim and no longer make any sense. And you have to squeal retcon, 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 which doesn't even make sense for the anime version, which is already completed. So it only applies to the manga at best. I usually like to placate to this because it makes people really, really salty. But in my opinion, Jiren flatlines Broly, just being straight up honest. The classic SethTheProgrammer, the honest truth. All right, Jiren flatlines Broly. I don't think it's really debatable. And the level that Goku placed Jiren up at, full power, a level beyond God of Destruction level, then surpasses that Goku. This could place MUI at blue fusion levels of power, which going off the current manga isn't actually crazy, as Goten and Trunks rival Gohan base to base currently, as stated on the Dragon Ball Super website, but Gohan Beast, which rivals MUI, will likely be stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, with base super fusions being above blue level, such as Vegeta and base being above blue Goku in the manga unmastered, and Gogeta slapping away Broly's attacks in base and surpassing Super Saiyan Blues as just a Super Saiyan. If MUI is a fusion level multiplier, you can get a crazy number depending on what you say base blue is. And this isn't even crazy as well because we know that after the Moro arc, Goku thought his MUI and Vegeta as well thought his blue form actually surpassed Broly entirely. So as an example, if you say Gogeta appeared in the Tournament of Power and it took post-Tournament of Power levels to beat them, to then beat down Broly like it did, you can make new calcs such as base Gogeta equals blue Goku level pre-Omen 3. We can even downplay this and say base Gogeta is as strong as blue Vegeta was when he did the final flash on Jiren, which many of you who are veterans at this know that's downplay, which would be 16 million on our previous scale, then 20,000 for the lowballed Super Saiyan Blue multiplier, 320 billion. So even if you think Jiren and Broly are likely relative, the levels could reach the hundreds of billions times Battle of Gods Goku level once again, just downplaying every number. Super Saiyan Blue is way more than 20,000 times base, and Super Saiyan God is not equal to Super Saiyan 3. Fusion in itself is likely an absurd multiplier that can't even be calculated normally anymore, and so on and so forth. Moving on, Jiren also has a bottomless potential, and even after breaking his limits one time, surpasses MUI, which was annihilating him almost instantly. This is important because at the start of Dragon Ball Super for his reveal, he is noted as actually training. Training is something he does all the time, showing he does it in character and is likely training with MUI type fights in mind. So his next appearance in anime form will likely be monstrous. I wouldn't be surprised if he far surpasses Goku if Goku doesn't do something crazy in the anime when he comes back. Because in the manga version, Goku doesn't have that maxed out, enraged, emotion-filled MUI that the anime had. It has this sort of version that is alien to Goku, and it takes him multiple arcs to get it down right against Beast Gohan after it gassed and the true Ultra Instinct stuff. And this is similar for Super Saiyan Blue as well. In the anime, it was mastered right off the bat, but in the manga, it took multiple arcs to get the full power, not getting the full power really until the Tournament of Power. This lets us actually do a further lowball calculation, so the furthest lowball for Jiren Tournament of Power looks something like 1.28 billion on our scale, and then using lowballed Broly and Gogeta Blue scaling could look something like this, a 320 billion level number. That Broly and Gogeta calc ignores that Gogeta would be stronger than post-Tournament Power Goku, who in base might rival Android 17, who was Kaioken times 20 blue level before, and has infinite ki, albeit he can take physical damage. Later in Super, using the manga, Vegeta and Goku are confirmed the strongest in the universe after the Moro arc, even after Broly. For Goku, this is whatever since he could use UI, but Vegeta still only has blue here, and then goes into his own ultra ego or instinct state. If we use anime logic here and say it'll be the same plot thread, you could have this Vegeta be his blue evolution equivalent, surpassing Broly around 320 billion, then 2 times for Omen, 640 billion, then arguably 1.28 trillion for MUI, ultra ego, and if Jiren is at this level or higher after training. Even if he is relative to the cast on the God Brawl, these numbers might get into the trillions and beyond, and this is ignoring many amps to just their base forms and much more they receive in Moro and Granola on top of this. In terms of the narrative, Jiren is supposed to be that perfected Goku ideal that he sought throughout Dragon Ball Z and then had to learn was incorrect. Due to this, Jiren gets a power-up at the end of the Tournament of Power, but it's already when he's so fatigued you can't really tell, implying the new Jiren's narrative might far exceed what was rivaling Goku at his peak during that arc, meaning Jiren can realistically, narratively speaking, be above Goku, and at worst would be his rival still. The last thing to go over is Jiren's raw fight IQ and skill. This is what Vegeta references today, which is highly significant as it means quite a few things, and I don't think people really realize what it means for Vegeta to be on Jiren's case even right now. It means that his fighting skills likely far surpass not just Goku and Vegeta, which by Dragon Ball Super is highly significant. These two were considered masters compared to martial artists tens of thousands of years old in Dragon Ball Z, such as the Otherworld fighters, and then confused together and mastered their styles, becoming a physical and a psychological threat to his opponents and mastering Dragon Ball hands to a T, learning how to potentially monitor and suppress your own opponent's ki control, and to perfectly strike and handle yourself. Yet Vegeta mentions Jiren as his go-to guy to learn from. Not Vegito, not Gogeta, not even Beerus, but Jiren. He thinks Jiren wasn't much stronger than them, and maybe by the end of the Tournament of Power, this was possibly closer to the truth, such as when Jiren was getting jumped by times 20 Goku, Ultra Ego Vegeta in 17. But even then, he's definitely much more powerful than them, dashing through barriers that is over 2 times 17 strength to try and cancel out an opponent's attack, as stated in Daizenshu, by the dozens, such as in Cell's barrier entry. But that's still crazy, as it then far surpasses Goku's base instincts that can adapt to precogging a Master Assassin, skipping from the future to kill him, adapting to Master Roshi as just a child, and much, much more. I think it should be understated that Jiren also has some type of Ultra form or Instinct form. His aura is identical to MUI's in style, and also produces fires and heats shown from intense instinct, losing yourself in the fire and passion of your battle and your opponent until you eventually find Ultra Instinct is its very definition by Whis. So while he likely doesn't have MUI per se, as nobody in the audience says it either, it's likely still some type of Ultra form, just like Ultra Ego would be Vegeta's MUI equivalent. I wouldn't be surprised if that was kind of built like Ultra Instinct in the anime, but purple. Now, whether he gets an MUI type multiplier or not is probably not likely, but if so, then we kind of get into crazy territory. Vegeta thinks that Jiren has the ability to strike perfectly with all your power at optimal times to look like a powerhouse juggernaut, even to people relative to you in strength. Even in the anime, this may have been shown with Jiren's Infinity Rush, which as 17 describes, is attacking multiple times in an instant compared to what he was literally doing before, having instantaneous attacks even with the same level of power. Instantaneous attacks relative or compared to your normal looking strikes, meaning they almost look infinite in nature compared to your strikes previously, with MUI also perfectly striking large scale attacks with smaller ones to cancel them. But once again, it more so is something to add to Jiren's arsenal as a fighter, which makes him even more skilled than Dragon Ball Super Vegeta and Gogeta, rather than, say, a downplay of his power, which no one agrees with. This is also likely, as we learn in the Dragon Ball Super manga, that Vegeta remembers what Vegito knew or was thinking, which is how he learned about Goku's ability to use his powered-up blue form that could rival Fusion Zamasu, making a statement even more blatant and putting Jiren in competition for best-known hand-to-hand fighters in Dragon Ball history, period, being the only one confirmed above a Goku-Vegeta God fusion for a very long time, outside of probably Whis and maybe Moro as well, but that gets a little bit debatable around the Angel part. Lastly, due to his nature as above Beerus, he may also scale above Arale, who can surpass her fiction multiple times. Unless you think Beerus specifically just has some anti-gag power, Arale can run through time and so much more, so Jiren would be the level of character that would likely reach those crazy Arale feats if you think that Beerus just surpasses Arale due to raw power and not maybe just some type of tone armor. That being said, that's really the most there is to say. You could probably add a bunch of more details and go on for hours about Ultra Instinct and all the other cameos, how in Dragon Ball Heroes, MUI and Jiren were considered crazier at the time than relative fusions, and much, much more. But that being said, these are really some of my favorite moments in all of Dragon Ball. It's some of the coolest stuff ever. It really doesn't surprise me that it blew up the internet as it did. And I really do hope that the anime kind of brings that vibe back. That being said though, I do hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you next time. Peace.